So we're going to do the Doc Savage panel today. We've got about 45 minutes for a pretty brisk deal. We've got a few pages of matter here to go through. We're going to kind of cover, and some of you will know some of this stuff probably better than us. You know, who is Doc Savage, his age, some of the tropes that they came up with back then that got copied, maybe even shamelessly stolen for the comic books and such like that. A little bit of brief background about myself, then it'll be brief background from Rurik. We actually became friends through Doc Savage because I was like the other person in town that knew what the words Doc and Savage were next to each other, and so we kind of bumped into each other that way. I started collecting when I was about 12, running around to garage sales, picking up all the books that I could. Most recently, I'm the author of the Doc Savage book reviews, which show up on Facebook on a number of different sites. It's on Pulp Culture, which is a Facebook group. It's on the Flea Run, which is a Facebook group. You know the Flea Run? And then it's on my page, and there's one other one that gets shared too. Oh, A People's History of Comics. So if you want to read the Doc Savage book reviews, I'm going from 1 to 181 in order, and I discuss the plot of the story, interesting historical facts that go along with it, and then I rate them on what kind of action was put into the book, how weird the books were, because there's a lot of weird stuff, that's what you're reading for. And then from a modern perspective, how cringy are the books? Because during the 30s, there was some difficult language that might have been used that doesn't situate so well today. But as we'll talk about a little bit, Lester Dent was a pretty progressive guy, so they sit fairly well, I think. So that's kind of a little bit about me. And Rick?
One thing I'm going to give Jeff a little shout out. His reviews are actually really amusing because he starts out everyone, I'm reading them so you don't have to, but you should.
That's right.
Which I highly agree. I started out with Doc Savage in high school because, you know, lonely kid, bookstores, there, Shopper City, Coon Rapids, they had this great little book nook, and I would just, you know, mom's shopping, I'm over here. And I picked these things up, kind of like I got into Tangerine Dream. It was like, what are these things over on the side? And I started picking up Doc, and boom, hey, these are awesome. Then, coincidentally, another friend in high school was reading the same thing, so all of a sudden I had a Doc Savage buddy. And then we moved to South Dakota, and then I made another Doc Savage buddy. So, you know, we're out there. Your case in point with you guys here today.
There you go. Well, why don't we start, Rick? Maybe, I know a lot of the crowd knows Doc, but maybe you can introduce the man of bronze, Clark Savage Jr.
Clark Savage Jr., man among men. Clark Savage. The whole thing?
What?
The whole thing? Start from scratch?
Well, just tell them who you think Doc is and why it's, you know, just tell the background of Doc.
Okay, I will. So there. Doc Savage, son of Clark Savage Sr., was a man raised by science. Started out studying with all of the scientists, all of the doctors, all of the weight training to be the perfect man. So Doc, as through the years, would spend 2 hours a day doing calisthenics, so much so that he ended up also having the Fortress of Solitude up in the Arctic so that he could perform all of his scientific experiments. Living in the Empire State Building at the very top, which was a lovely view, had his own scientific thing up there with the crew around to always study. I know I'm being very generic here because I know Jeff's going to go in a little more detail.
That's all right. Yeah, well, and that's basically the background of Doc. He was a trope that was put together of a lot of other characters that came before him. Sherlock Holmes, Nick Carter. Does anybody know the Nick Carter stories? Yeah, it was basically a boy detective type thing, and then it got changed over the years. Professor Challenger. Lester Dent, who was one of the main writers, was a voracious reader and just pulled in everything he could, as much science as he could. Doc has been described as a cross between Merlin the Magician and a knight in shining armor, but in the 1930s. He was never for hire. He did it for fun, and he had an insatiable amount of gold provided to him by the Mayan Empire that his dad had found. Interestingly enough, Doc Savage is the man of bronze, and not once in the books do they refer to him as being a Caucasian white fellow. That's only his friends. It was very much forward thinking. They wanted Doc to be an everyman, and that's really what they put forward, was an everyman but at the height of perfection.
True. I mean, that's what Doc was stressed to be studied in all arts, sciences, and everything in between, chemistry. And despite the fact that he had his crew of experts, he was still an expert among the crew of experts.
Right. Master surgeon, chemist, lawyer, electrician, etc. Now, Doc is very much a human being, except for one superpower. He actually has one superpower. Does anyone know what it is? Well, he's afraid of women. That's actually not a superpower. Actually, that's a thing that you talk to your therapist about. But, it could be a superpower. I will give you a clue. Yes?
Is it his sense of hearing?
No, that was just specially trained. This is the weirdest thing. If he jumps into water, what happens?
Oh, the water sets right off.
Yeah, he can't get wet.
Yeah.
He can't get wet. For coming up with that, you get a badly beat up copy of the Magi, complete with a book plate inside. Enjoy. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, it's the weirdest superpower ever, and it's actually in the original notes for the character. He can't get wet. He gets out of the water, his hair's just dry. I don't know how he showers or bathes. It's got to be wretched if you're around him too much. I don't know. Origins of Doc Savage. John Manovic was the editor at Street and Smith. He had been working on The Shadow. They wanted a character that would contrast with the darkness of the shadow, so they came up with Doc Savage with the light side of it. And the treatise was called Doc Savage, Supreme Adventurer. And they tapped somebody to do those books. So who'd they pick to be the main writer?
Kenneth Robeson.
Yes, a fake name.
That was the infamous Lester Dent, adventurer of his own style.
He really was. He was a treasure hunter. He was a ship sailor. He went to the Florida Keys and dove for treasure. Did not find it. Spoiler alert. He would be a world traveler and a voracious reader. He was the primary writer under the name Kenneth Robeson. And if he didn't write it, he at least did a scan through edit of all the other books by the other authors. Per Dent's notebook, he writes, "This all began December 10, 1932. So that's when he got the writing assignment, is at that time. And during that time period, it was the height of the Great Depression. It was a tough time for everybody. I don't think that today, look, I'm very much a person who's very cognizant of the disparities in wealth with people. I went to a homeless conference last year in San Francisco and listened to some of the stories, and they're heartbreaking. During the Great Depression, it was like that on crack because there was no way to share those stories, so people couldn't get the resources. My dad grew up on a farm during the Depression. They couldn't afford wood to put over his bedroom wall, and so that's what they used for the deep freezer. In the winter, they literally stacked the meat up in his bedroom to cover the hole in the wall to freeze it. I mean, this is stuff we can't even comprehend today. It's just insane level of depression. And people wanted hope, and they wanted change, they wanted an escape. I mean, that's why for 10 cents you got all these different stories. So, like The Shadow.
The Shadow, The Avenger, The Spider, all of the pulp heroes that were the origins of so many of our superheroes now.
Right. It was a chance for them to go out and get revenge on the wealthy capitalists and such that were basically keeping them in poverty, and a lot of those stories had that kind of a theme. Now, The Shadow was a very dark character. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men and all that. But Doc was very different. Doc didn't live in the shadows. He lived at the top of a tall skyscraper. Doc didn't slink around at night. He was out there punching a guy in the face who was doing something wrong. So it was just a very different type of character. What do you think you got out of the Doc books?
A role model. To aspire to be as best as you can be. I had no misconceptions that I was going to be a doctor, lawyer, chemist, scientist, electrician, but it gave you an optimistic escape even as a kid. Just to see this really cool guy, maybe a teen role model, so to speak, of just how you should behave. You just treat each other decently and you act with honor.
Here you are, some poor kid living on the city streets. probably homeless. They'd buy books and just share them between each other till the pages fell out. All of a sudden, you're running around South America. You know, you're in an island full of dinosaurs. You're going under the polar ice looking for treasure. I mean, this was really high escape for people back then. And the stories were well written with a lot of positivity. The art was fantastic. Paul Orban, I will pay good money for a Paul Orban desk book. It's insane what this guy did with pen and ink, just insane. And every month, illustration after illustration after illustration. I mean, that's a glorious dinosaur. I wish that we had a little better vision of it. Quick quiz. So on the right, Rurik, who is that artist?
Oh, that is the immortal James Bama.
James Bama, absolute immortal, a god among men, died last year or the year before. Outstanding artist, one of the tops. Joe Jusko said, I wish I could be Bob Larkin. Bob Larkin said, I wish I could be James Bama. So, you know, it's one of those things.
Now, here's your little trivia thing. James Bama was a very well-renowned illustrator, but then when he retired, he went into going and doing wildlife, or rather Native American and cowboys.
Yes.
To see, his stuff is beautiful if you ever get a chance to look at the book. I mean,
well, here's quiz number 2. So that was the fellow who did the covers for Bantam. On the original pulps, and again, it's a little washed out, who knows who the artist was on the original pulps? You know? Walter Baumhofer. Absolutely. Now, you're going to have to pick somebody else to get a copy of the book, because you got a book. But you can trade. You can pick which one you want. So here's the movie edition of Man of Bronze. But Walter Baumhofer was the king of the pulps. And for a good reason. I got to see some of his original art at Windy City a couple years ago. Dude, here's this woman in peril and the hair, and you're going, oh my God. I go look at it. He just took oil paint and whipped it at the canvas and struck his palette knife through it twice. And your jaw drops at the technique and skill. So these things sold. They really captured the people's imaginations back then. So over the years, a lot of other artists have worked on Doc too.
Yeah, so Doc became popular again in the 70s or so. Obviously, the Marvel comics, those made a huge impression on me. The Ross Andrew art, you know, whenever you know, Jeff's like, hey, what do you think of Doc Savage? I picture, and it was either that one or in the magazine, Doc Savage on the running board of the car while the crew's inside, cruising down Manhattan, and it's just like, joy, energy. We're going to go kick some ass and we're going to help some people.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and again, you know, in the 70s, it was almost a badge of honor for a lot of the artists to be able to draw Doc or do the cover. If you notice, remember a young upstart artist named Boris Vallejo? We're all like, who's this guy? Hey, he's kind of good. And all of a sudden, he just basically took over after Frazetta. John Buscema, the pretty much preeminent artist for everything Marvel.
Can we have you do 700 pages by noon? Sure.
Yeah,
all right, thank you.
You know, I would like to have seen a face-off between John Buscema and Jim Aparo for who can do the most, the fastest, in the shortest amount of time.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's like the Marvel had their Swiss Army knife in John, DC had their Swiss Army knife in Aparo.
Yeah, and it was a pretty influential character. Even Dave Stevens did it, and he included Doc in The Rocketeer, as many of you may know. One of the things that's interesting about Doc is that the stories were full of futurism, a lot of gadgets and science, and Lester Dent was very much a progressive. He wrote stories that tried to give people morality lessons, and he did the best he could with the tools he had at the time. So they go and explore a lot of continents, and what the bad trope would be is these are lost civilizations, and the people in these civilizations be, we're not lost, we've been here all along, I know exactly where I am. You know, it's only lost to somebody who's never heard of them before. And Dent, in one of the early stories, says to the reader, well, to his men, hey, we're going to go visit people that don't have our level of technology. That doesn't mean that they're either stupid, and it doesn't mean that they're dumb, and it doesn't mean that their way of life is bad. It just means it's different than the way we live our lives, so kind of be cool. would you? I mean, that's a pretty powerful thing for the 1930s, to me anyway. But, I mean, what are some of the gadgets? Dick Tracy, the wristwatches that contain the walkie-talkies. That was 6 years before. Remote opening doors like you do over at the grocery store and then it doesn't work. Pockets full of micro grenades, usually filled with anesthetic gas or something. Utility vest that was filled with gadgets. My favorite gadget, he had one pocket full of different wigs. My brain still can't
But who
wrap around
doesn't
it.
have that?
Right in the middle of the book, Doc Savage reached for the pocket which contained all of his wigs so he could put on the appropriate disguise. What? It just,
Yes.
okay, cool. What else we got up there, Rurik?
Well, I see that you've got the bulletproof lightweight undergarments, which we all know were perfected by Adam West with his special bat underwear.
Yes, exactly. The little super firework.
Oh, the Superfire. Years ago at a convention, Mike Grell was there, and I got a Doc Savage drawing from him. And he's like, well, what do you want Doc to do? I'm like, well, I want Doc with a gun. He's like, Doc never used a gun. I'm like, the hell he didn't. He used the super machine firing pistol with anesthetic bullets. He's like, damn it, you're right.
So he actually had a gun that fired bullets that when they hit, they just break the skin lightly and then hit you with a knockout gas and you just knock right over. Which was used by, there's a 1940s character that had the same gimmick, but his shot gas.
Oh, the Sandman?
Yeah, the Sandman character. Used that later. Night vision goggles with radioactive materials, incredible surgical techniques. In one of the books, one of the apes, Johnny, has surgery on his eye, and I gave the description to an eye doctor who went, holy crap, I actually know the surgery he did. And at that time period, that would have been considered experimental. So that's how much research went into these things. Hello, you're back again. So the stories were also full of hope. Doc fought actual evil people. Like I just said, in one of the early books he tells his aides, just because we're visiting a people that doesn't have our same level of technology doesn't make them any worse. He was super topical. Doc Savage wanted, I don't want people mad at me over this, free healthcare for everyone. And anytime he got a reward, what did he do with it? He built a hospital that gave out free care for everyone. In one of the books he says, so we have rich people who don't want to pay taxes. I've never heard that happening. And they're so mad about paying taxes, they start a civil war in South America so they can end up owning both countries and create their own tax-free country. And Doc goes, but Jesus, how much money does a guy need before he realizes he's got enough? I mean, it's just topical stuff. They actually have him fight the Ku Klux Klan, although in that book they veiled it as the Green Death. But during the 30s, at this time period, you cannot read the history of the Klan without just literally vomiting from the amount of stuff they were at and the places they got their tentacles into. And so it's amazing they even did that. Yeah, absolutely. And then the rich guys who were mad that was Dagger in the Sky.
Well, before you pop off,
Yeah.
I'm going to also pop in on the Crime College, remember?
Oh, yeah.
So,
Okay.
we're...
Okay, now we'll get to cringy again. Go ahead.
Yes. Well, that depends on your perspective. So, yeah, Doc would catch the criminals, but he didn't want to just put them away. So he sent them upstate to the Crime College, where he would go on later to revisit them, operate on their brains, fix them so that they were not criminals, and then rehabilitate them, put them back in society. So, that might be a little cringy, but I don't know. You sign a waiver,
It's a little science to perfect people to the people we want them to be.
Just because their science is different doesn't mean they're worse than us or that they're stupid.
Yeah,
There you go.
Yeah,
There you go.
Yeah, and Doc, I mean, his training program was kind of out of a eugenics manual, which isn't really great, but, it worked out good for him. How's that? So
He didn't charge anybody. It was free health.
It was free healthcare. You get a free brain surgery with every crime.
Oh no, was it John Sunlight that decided to take some of those criminals and reverse it? There was somebody
No,
in
that's a
there.
different book, but yeah, John, somebody figures out the crime college technique and then starts reversing it on people so they feel the urge to commit more crimes. We call that Walmart today, but that's a different joke. Just never mind. All right, Doc's HQ and warehouse. As Rurik mentioned, the Empire State Building is 86 floors where Doc theoretically had his headquarters. People who have analyzed the Doc book believe that that's incorrect and it's actually the Chrysler Building. There is a lot of good evidence when you read the book. I just saw a guy on Facebook map out where the underground tunnels had to be based on the locations in the book to figure out where Doc's headquarter warehouse was, the Hidalgo Trading Company. And I sat there and went, what the? It's all cited. So, but either way, he had a skyscraper in New York at the top, and it had a high-speed elevator that ran down under the earth, underneath the river, to his warehouse, the Hidalgo Trading Company, that was full of boats.
Planes, autogyros, submarines.
Submarines. Yep, the Helldiver was one of his famous subs. Yep. By the way, that artwork, the great Don Wildey. And Don Wildey wanted to do an animated series called Doc Savage. What did that animated series become? Johnny Quest, that's right. Right. Because Street and Smith wanted, I think, $1 million for the episodes. And this is in 1960 when, why would we pay you $1 million for the episodes? But Doc's warehouse was the prototype for the Batcave.
So Race Bannon is Doc Savage.
Well, Race Bannon is the physical Doc,
Right.
and Dr. Quest is the mental Doc. Yep. And Johnny Quest himself is the Doc, the boy adventurer. So, Doc had a bunch of friends. All of these, in my reading of it, were aspects of Doc that he couldn't be himself. So you had Monk. Monk would actually look like a gorilla-shaped guy with bright red, spiky hair. He had a bullet hole in one ear. He owned a pet pig, Habeas. And he was a brilliant chemist. But Monk just said whatever the hell he wanted to and just punched people, and Doc never could. And he was shameless with women, Doc couldn't be. Ham, Thomas Marley Brooks, a lot of us attorneys, I talked to him, this was their life hero growing up. It was for me, the height of sartorial perfection, an excellent dresser. People would follow him down the street, how to wear a shirt, that kind of thing. Always carried his
Sword cane.
Yep, with a sleeping drug on it. And he had a pet ape thing named Chemistry that looked identical to Monk. They hated each other back and forth, but they were best of friends.
Bromance.
Yes, it was a bromance. Monk framed Ham for stealing hams. That's how he got his name. And so the love wasn't lost. But those were two of the aides. Rennie Renwick, world-class engineer. His fists were the size of milk jugs. And his favorite hobby was just to punch through doors. He didn't care. He just saw a wooden door. Boosh! It's one of the great scenes in the Doc Savage movie, actually, is they actually have Rennie punch through a door to knock the villain out. It's great. And John Wayne on a set actually punched the guy through a door and knocked him out.
Fort Mon. It wasn't at a set, it was on a party.
Oh, at a party.
Yeah.
So the sadder he looked, the happier he was. I tried to ask some people who are psychologists. I'm pretty sure that's a real psychological thing, where the sadder you are, the happier you are. And I just call it my daily life. But what is it? Is it really a thing?
It's you see it in a lot of psychosis. You can get a lot of schizophrenia, but some people just have it sort of.
Yeah, it's very well written in the book about that. Johnny, William Harper Littlejohn, never used a small word where a big word would do. Quick quiz, what's his famous catchphrase? I heard it back here first. You get the really horrible copy of The Fantastic Island. Well done, sir. I'll be super amalgamated. In high school, I actually had the shirt, I'll be super amalgamated. Also, I didn't get a lot of dates. But I did have the t-shirt, I'll be super amalgamated. Long Tom Roberts, electrical engineer, also the master of disguise. He looked like he was dead, like a human mushroom kept in the dark too long. But he could disguise himself as anything quickly, including a snowbank. He actually disguised himself as a snowbank. That's No, that was Doc. Doc had the pocket of wigs, but Long Tom did not. He should have. It's crazy, dude. But each of these are kind of an aspect of Doc. Johnny, too, it's kind of interesting. There's people out there that read through the Lester Dent memorabilia and wonder if he was a little bit on the closeted side. He certainly had a lot of his writings dealt with, the language had kind of a slight homoerotic theme to it. But Johnny, the character Johnny, a lot of the language is stuff I heard growing up in the 60s about people when you didn't want to say they were gay. Like, that's someone who would never date a woman. Or, that's a fellow whose women's charms just can't work on him. And they actually come up against a woman villain whose mind controls to make men fall in love with her, and it doesn't work on Johnny. So I kind of wonder what Dent was doing with that. And unfortunately, he's passed away. Doc's only living relative, Pat Savage, the woman of bronze, loved adventure, excellent shot, learned judo, lip reading, savvy businesswoman, ran a health club named Pat's.
I always loved the Pat stories, you know, because you used the word progressive earlier. Pat was progressive. She was never invited in on any of the adventures. Pat's just like, oh, you guys are going out for having some fun and go and bust some heads? I'm coming with you. And they're like, no, you should stay home. Woman's place here. And she's like, the hell I am.
Yeah, no, she went out every time.
Yep.
Yeah, people unfairly say that the Doc books are full of the Scream Queen trope, but there's a lot of really amazing, good female characters. There's a super spy in, I think, The Man Who Shook the Earth. Doc goes in to rescue her, and she's like, I really don't need the rescue. I'm kind of already untied myself and about to kill 7 guys. And Doc goes, well, I'm here. She goes, okay. I guess as long as you're here, I don't want to bum you out by not letting you rescue me. So.
Why are you here, Doc? Why you didn't bring coffee?
That's right. Of course, they had the pets. Here's a famous Paul Orban drawing of Monk meeting chemistry for the first time. Habeas corpus was the world's ugliest pig. Super long dog legs, snout designed for finding truffles. Monk would use ventriloquism on it. And Ham's pet chemistry was a what is it? They never defined it as a specific species. And he was the size of Plot. So in some books he's so small Ham can carry him and parachute out of a plane. And in others he's so big that in the middle of the fight the bad guys forget which Monk they're fighting and capture chemistry and think they captured Monk. So
convenient.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things. Did you like the pets or did you not like the pets?
Oh, I liked the pets. I thought they were a blast because the Ham Monk paradigm was always hilarious. And it was just the two squabbles. It was like yin and yang, frick and frack. So
yeah,
the pets just took that up a level.
Yeah, I think so. I enjoyed them. There's some Doc fans that just hate them. For Doc fans here, do you like or hate the pets? Down? It kind of depends.
They're good as comic relief in the city. They shouldn't take them off.
Although Habeas does become king of the pigs on Poison Island, which was great, but never mind. All right, the Doc Savage Oath. This was something they used and printed and gave out to kids everywhere. And it's again, shocking that this is progressive in 2024. Let me strive every moment of my life to make myself better and better to the best of my ability, that all may profit by it. Oh my God, let's help others. Let me think of the right and lend my assistance to all who need it, with no regard for anything but justice. Let me take what comes with a smile without loss of courage. Let me be considerate of my country, my fellow citizens, my associates, everything I say and do. Let me do right to all and wrong to no man. And they really tried to work that into the books, I think. One of the problems with the Doc books is in that era, Doc, being a master of disguise, would disguise himself as various characters. Sometimes it would be people of color from China or Africa or those backgrounds. I talked to Will Murray, who's one of the executors of the Dent estate, and he said Doc was never intended to be a white person. He was intended to be literally a man made out of bronze that any person reading the books could look up to. And so with that in mind, I don't know if that's as cringy as it is or not. As a geeky white guy reading these today, I think Dent was trying to tell readers a lesson. So there's one book where there's this bad guy, 2-bit. He's Chinese. Now 2-bit, as you know, is a derogatory word for something broken or cheap. Throughout the entire book, all of Doc's 5 friends are ripping on the guy. To the point where 2-Bit says, if you go down that path, all of you will be shot to death. And they go, I'm not trusting him, he's Chinese. Horrible. 2 pages later, after they get shot at, Doc comes up and goes, are you people morons? 2-Bit is the only honest character in the entire story so far, and he's actually trying to save everybody, and you people are so prejudiced you can't see it, and they all go, oh, sorry. So, is it cringy because of the way they depicted him, or is it not cringy because of the lesson at the end? That's for readers to determine, but I think it's interesting that they would throw those kind of stories in there.
But Doc was always kind of a morality play, I thought. You know, you talk about your Shakespeare with your morality plays, but, you know, for the pulp era and for our era, Doc was morality. You know, he set your goals, what you value, what you honor.
Yeah, and Doc stories were super popular when they came out. Like I said, Dent was a voracious reader. And we're going to go through some examples of, was it borrowed from Doc or was it maybe borrowed from Doc? Before I do, I just want to tell you that if you do go back and read the old Doc Savages, not all the books were written by Lester Dent. Lester Dent, like in The Man of Bronze and another book, super pro-American Indian. Very, very, very much on their side. In Man of Bronze, he goes, they just got shafted by the U.S. government. I mean, that's the very first book he puts it in. In another book, they're running through the jungle. The indigenous folks are throwing spears and stuff at them because they're in a place they shouldn't be. And the white woman running along goes, my goodness, it's like they never saw a white person before. And Doc goes, or they just talked to the American Indians and learned how the government screwed them. It's just, I mean, this is like 1938. You know, who's putting this in a book? But then you're going to get to Lawrence Donovan, who never started a book before he'd had his first half of a bottle of whiskey and then drank the other half while he was reading it. And there's one book, The Land of Long Juju, which I will not describe in public because it literally could be burned with a flamethrower and we'd all be better off. So,
Tell us how you really feel.
It's a god-awful book. It's an abomination. It uses every racist stereotype about Africa. The one line I'll put out there to show you how bad it is, one of the characters goes, Africa would be a pretty good place if we could just get white people to run it. Not something I'm gonna adopt as a phrase. Just I'm not going to. That's the nicest thing that happens in the book. But that's Lawrence Donovan, and I am obsessed that he was a time traveler who met me, hated me, and went back in time to write these books just to cause me pain. So but I don't know what to say. You see stuff like that, and it's not justifiable. It's just not. It was horrifying. But Dent really did a good job. Superman, the Man of Steel.
It's taken after the Man of Bronze.
Doc Savage was advertised as both Superman and Man of Tomorrow before Superman was created.
And it's, you know, these are all just so blatant. It's just ridiculous, you know. Yeah. But, you know, there's the old adage, if you're going to steal from the best.
I'm shocked that they didn't get sued over it. In one of the books, Doc is listed as being able to leap over a fence in a single bound. Bullets bounce off of his body because of his bulletproof underwear. He's faster than a speeding car for short distances.
So you're saying Siegel and Schuster read pulps?
Yes, they were big fans. Doc had a Fortress of Solitude. It was a blue dome. I got nothing.
In the Blue Dome in the Arctic?
In the Arctic. Both Superman and Doc Savage had ventriloquism. They could paralyze people with a touch. Jim Steranko noted that the initial drawings of Superman were very close to the early Paul Orban drawings of Doc Savage. Doc had the original trope of I can't date people because my enemies would get to me through my date. I think he was just cheap and did not want to pay for the steak dinner. That's. And Superman, of course, couldn't get married to Lois, allowing us to have 140 episodes of Lois Lane comics. Batman.
Rich kid, lots of toys, fighting crime.
Parents dead.
Parents dead. What did we forget?
What's that one?
Yes,
Clark Savage. Yep, Clark Savage. Yep. And then Clark Kent. Now the Siegel Schuster guys said they named him after Clark Gable.
Well, let's also look at the time. Clark was actually a popular name at the time too, so that one might have some validity.
But
I'll give it a gray area.
I am with you. I am with you on that one. But Doc and Batman both swung around the city on a grappling hook on a rope. Doc had his utility vest. He got moved to the utility belt. Both were orphans.
Yep. And again, the Hidalgo Trading Company, Batcave. You know, you've got your marvelous cavern of toys.
And this, yes.
It wasn't emphasized as much years ago on Batman, but now whenever they talk about Bruce Wayne growing up, he traveled the world and trained with every expert.
Self-trained, all that stuff. Yes, exactly. No, I 100% agree. The stories were ripped off endlessly. So some of the people like Lawrence Donovan needed extra cash, so DC would hire him to ghostwrite stories on Superman, and he would just take his old Doc Savage plots and reuse them. One of the famous Fleischer cartoons where he's fighting the electrical bolts in the air, that was from a Doc Savage book. The very famous from Batman #1, second appearance of Dr. Hugo Strange, the Giants of Hugo Strange is taken literally from the Monsters, where the villain uses the pituitary glands to enhance growth in people with horrifying results. So I really wish this one wasn't washed out. Amazing Baumhofer cover. Bauma actually used that and copied it himself because it was just too good not to. But not all the tropes first appeared in Doc Savage and were used in Superman Batman. I'm going to show you one now that inspired, I think it was Sailor Moon. Somebody can help me out. Can you see that? Oh, that's too bad. Here, it's literally the Red Skull, and it says on it, the Red Skull. Honest to God. Later, Simon said, oh no, I was looking at a cherry sundae and that inspired the Red Skull. Oh crap, he and Kirby read all these pulps. The character design is 100% the way Baumhofer did it. It's just like, what is going on here? Don't anybody take away, I think these people are stealing. They saw good ideas, they made them their own and owned them, right? It's just amazing to see how much it was influenced. The Vulcan nerve pinch. Doc literally was using it for 181 stories. Historians that have gone through it says it's probably the most unique Doc trope of all Doc tropes, is that he could do that. In battle, he could just pinch somebody and they'd fall over. And it was later used, Nimoy was supposed to punch somebody on the set, but Nimoy was a pacifist against the Vietnam War and said, oh, what if I just pinch their neck and they fall over? And so the Nimoy, and then later the Spot pinch, and Vulcan pinch came up.
Now, here's the one thing that nobody has ever ripped off Doc on. The trilling.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Doc would always get mystified, and when he's thinking, he's like, there's a mystery afoot, there's something to solve, there's something that's bugging me, and he would make this little trilling sound that nobody could ever tell where it was coming from. But oddly enough, Doc was always in the room. That's right up there with, like, well, you know, never been in the same room with Batman either. But
there you go.
You know where that's coming from.
Well, you got the wristwatch. We already talked about that, the Dick Tracy thing. It was used in Doc Savage in the 30s, and then Dick Tracy picked it up in the early 40s. Also in the early 30s, Long Tom drove around with a TV set in his car. I don't know what he was watching, honestly. The Fantastic Four, Doc had his HQ. The Baxter Building was their HQ. Kirby was a big pulp fan. What do you think of Ben and Johnny?
Oh, yin and yang, frick and frack, ham and monk.
Yeah, the squabbling partners that they're both would take a bullet for each other, or a Dr. Doomfist, but the squabbling bros. The family of adventurers, out for adventure and science. Reed Richards has been compared as an actual Doc delusion at some points. Other places to find Doc. What do we got up here?
Johnny Quest, you've got the Rocketeer, we've got Quantum Leap. One that we haven't mentioned also would also be the Venture Brothers.
Oh, I think it may be coming up. But yeah, Quantum Leap is interesting. They actually said they wanted the Doctor to emulate some of the abilities of Doc Savage. So that was kind of interesting to see. And I wish that was a little better vision, because Dave Stevens' version of Monk and Ham is just gorgeous. Just jaw-dropping. Here we go, Buckaroo Banzai. Which character is that? Doc Brass?
Oh, yeah, from Planetary.
There's the Venture brothers, Dr. Jonas Venture, actually dressed as Doc Savage on purpose. And my favorite of all, My Little Pony. Complete with Doc Savage on a poster, but Doc Savage as a My Little Pony. It's the episode Petey Pie Knows Something, I think is what it's called. It's brilliant.
This is the one where I'm like, where do you find this stuff?
I got no life. I have no life. Seriously, I have no life. Where can we find Doc today? The Ron Ely movie.
Oh, somebody was at my booth today. We were talking about doing this panel, and he's like, "Oh, are you going to be touching on the Doc movie?" I'm like, "Only briefly. It's okay. It's only briefly."
But you know what? As weird as it was, we were talking before the show started, they actually took lines and scenes from all the Doc books and put them in there. They decided to go with the camp style, which wasn't good. There's the Wold Newton universe. Basically, a meteorite hit Russia, I think it was, and all the radiation went out and created all the characters. You got, what was it? UK, but you got Sherlock Holmes, Professor Challenger, they're all related somehow. I'm not a Wold Newton guy, but it's a really huge part of the fandom. Philip Jose Farmer wrote it. Got it started. So many fan novels or Doc-esque novels. Will Murray, comic book people. Where's my comic book people? What did Will Murray come up with for a character that's uber popular today? Squirrel Girl, that's absolutely right. He created Squirrel Girl. Squirrel Girl was based on a real girl, Doreen, that he was dating, and he goes to church with her, which he said was a weird date, and they're sitting in church, and all of a sudden a squirrel pops out of her shirt and starts looking around. She just pokes it back down her shirt. You don't get a better origin than that. You just don't. So you get the last of the books. This one is the Charming Pirate's Ghost, which is a fantastic book, and has a scene that, as a geeky white guy, I appreciate. If I wasn't, I don't know if I would. Doc dresses up as a porter, a man of color, and stands in the room with the villain who cannot see the humanity in a person of color, and so right in front of Doc tells his entire villainous plot, every detail. And I think, I read it from my perspective that that's a lesson to the reader, but other people read it and say, no, that's just horrible cringy, so I guess I'll leave that for other people to decide. But it's a very interesting book. Ron Hill's got a documentary coming out, We Are Doc Savage. Win Scott Eckert has the Doc Caliban series, and he also has Patricia Wildman, which is a pastiche. Craig McDonald does Xana with Savage stories. R. Paul Sedana's the Doc Tallis series, very adult, and then all the Doc pulps were reprinted by Anthony Tollin.
I have a quick question. Has anybody ever met Anthony Tollin? I personally don't believe he exists. Years ago, I went out, I was working at a restaurant, my employers took me out, had a nice evening, and they knew Anthony Tollin's parents. And they knew I was a Doc Savage fan. They're like, oh, we'll bring you over. So after dinner, we went over, got to meet his parents, had a lovely evening drinking wine, talking about stuff. Anthony wasn't around, so I've never seen him. I don't think he exists. But his parents are sweet.
Yeah, so there you go. You can go out and find a lot of Doc stuff online. The Flea Run group on Facebook. The Flea Run is the name of the tube that run underneath to the warehouse. Chuck Welch's has the amazing DocSavage.org. I use that for a lot of my research. Tom Barnett does the outstanding bronzeicon.com, and the research he's done there is absolutely brilliant. Brilliant stuff. All the pulps and comics. And of course, this is dedicated to the parents who supported kids reading books by Lester Dent and the legion of fans that keep Doc alive. So, any questions from you guys? Yes. Yes. Yeah, so on the first one, no, they actually didn't license it out back then, which is weird, but they did do a series of radio plays that have all been wiped. They only have the scripts, and they don't even know what actors did them. It's just shocking. In terms of the modern stuff, the Shane Black stuff is hopefully dead. I like the casting of The Rock as Doc Savage. I really do. but they wanted to make him a high-functioning autistic fellow who didn't get the jokes of people around him. Come on, guys. There's a modern TV series attempt. I don't know how far along that is.
And personally, if we're going to do casting Doc, I would go for the, Alan Richardson from Reacher?
Yes.
I would put him as Doc any day.
Outstanding. Yeah, very good. Any other stuff, folks? Any other questions? So at our booth, Work's got Comic Book Vikings back there, a lot of good comic book sales. I've got my art booth over there at A10. I've got more of those book plate stickers.
We both have those at our booth, so if you want some more of those, hit one of us or both of us.
Then I've got some Doc art and stuff over there too if you're interested. Thank you very much, everybody. We really appreciate it. And thanks to Eric for running this thing. Outstanding. Appreciate it.